Throughout history, people have made amazing accomplishments that define themselves. Now, it's our turn to tell those accomplishments, to tell his story, her story, their story, and even your story. With Mike Wexler.
Welcome back to Your Story. I apologize that it has been a long hiatus. It has been crazy because we had a lot of other interviews that we were supposed to be on, but sadly we lost the footage. But regardless, we are back better than ever. Season 3. Oh my God, I didn't actually think we were going to make it to season 3. But regardless, I'm here with the one and only Jacob Tarasso, someone that is a Colton native. Colton being Colton, California, by the way, because there's a lot of Coltons out there. But welcome, Jacob Tarasso, as a part of season 3. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing all right, Mike. How you doing?
Pretty good. Shout out to the producer, Mike Contreras, of this, aka IE_photographer on Instagram. I hope I'm not getting that wrong, because he had done the awesomeness and hooked this up. And he's a really cool person, so go shout out to him as well. But we had a cool conversation before we aired, and it's really cool. I mean, it's really awesome to know how much you bleed and love Colton, California.
Yeah, I was born in San Bernardino, but I grew up probably the 95% of my adult life was in Colton. I kind of hopped around Colton, Bloomington, Riverside for like a brief minute, but my home is Colton. I lived in Colton for so long. That's the city I know the best. So
yeah, I mean it's same thing here. Born and raised in San Bernardino, but of course, I consider my hometown being Colton because the friends that I made over there, the connections, and even San Bernardino Valley College is technically on Colton ground.
Yes. I went there too, straight from CHS to Valley College for 3 years. Yeah.
Hey, same here, 3 years.
Yeah.
I think one of the most common misconceptions I think a lot of people get from when they come out of high school to community college is that they think that they have to get out of there within 2 years. For me, I started at the very bottom. Literally, I started very bottom, first English class, first everything over there. And even though there was struggles, I mean, you get to connect with a lot of people. And I think that's really special for a community college.
Yeah. When I was at Valley, I picked up 2 things that I carried into both my personal life and my professional life. I picked up sign language and I picked up acting. I took sign language and acting all 3 years that I was going to Valley, and both of them actually helped me tremendously. Acting helped me a lot in wrestling, and sign language did to an extent too. I had done a couple of deaf events. And I remember when I started doing sign with some of the deaf fans or whatever, they immediately were like, oh my God, he knows sign. And, it made them feel good that I learned their language and stuff. But yeah, I always tell this to people who kind of just start wrestling or just kind of have an interest in wrestling. One of the biggest things that can help you is an acting class. If you can go to your local community college and pay $20 for a semester of acting classes, it'll help you immensely. It's probably one of the most important things that I can say contributed to me wrestling.
Oh yeah. I mean, it also teaches you improv skills too, because not a lot of stuff happens the way you expect it.
Yeah. A lot of people get deer in the headlights and don't know, oh no, we fucked that up. What do we do? So acting classes in general, even in high school. I took acting at 2 years in high school too, and then that led to 3 years of college. So. But I loved it. It was a lot of fun that I got to do in wrestling too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and before we get into the wrestling career and what made you start wrestling as well, I do want to go back to the conversation we had off camera. Again, I feel bad that it was not recorded at all. But one of the mind-blowing things, if you're a Colton High, former student or your current student or teacher, faculty, or whatever, Colton High knows of this world famous greenhouse that was across the street
corner of F and Rancho.
Yes. So for the longest, I did, at least me, I didn't know anybody lived there until today. So can you kind of talk to us about kind of having this iconic, I would even say, figure, especially within the city of Colton.
I didn't even know like it was that big of a deal because like it's not like we had high school kids knocking on my door and being like, "Oh my God, somebody lives here," and then like running off or something, like nobody ever really knocked on my door asking if people live there. But yeah, that was my house for almost 30 years. I lived in that house. I a specific story about that house. So I had a teacher my first period of senior year of high school who knew my family very well. He knew my grandpa because he was in the school district. He knew my aunt because she was in the school district. He was the band director. His name's, well, he's not a teacher anymore. His name's Dr. G. And he was the band director of Colton High for the longest time. He was my first period teacher. And he came up to me and he said, "Hey, I know you play music. I know you already have an understanding of music and all of this. You don't technically need to be in this class. And I know your family very well. If you show up before the bell rings to excuse the class, I will just give you a passing grade for the year." Right. So
Wow.
every morning for school, I got to wake up like an hour late and just walk into his class 5 minutes before the bell rang and then just go to my second period. So
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
he knew I lived across the street. He knew all of that. And he was just like, "I know you already," it was like beginner music where it's like they just teach you how to read sheet music and that kind of stuff. And he knew I already had that understanding. So he's like, "You don't really need to be here. Just show up before the bell rings and I'll give you a passing grade." And I was like, "Done."
No, that's the hookup. I mean, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think would even be more like, I don't know if you guys had like a lot of late starts back before you graduated, but
I think
like,
we did. I think we
yeah,
started to try that out.
yeah. So like that would be awesome too. Just have that late start because when I went to high school, the late start would be at 9 o'clock. So like the first set of classes would be at 9 o'clock. So like imagine like you get to wake up instead of like, oh, I have to wake up at 8 now. Like you had that
Yeah.
extra hour of sleep. Like, come on, man.
Extra time at breakfast. You might go across the street to like get tater tots at one of the fast food places or something. You got all kinds of time in the world.
Absolutely. So now, aside from the hometown talk, I do want to talk about, just your transition from being a California native to going all the way cross country. And then from the conversation that we had before before we aired, I apologize. You went on the road for this. This was something that I give you kudos, man, because like looking at these gas prices nowadays, $6-7 a gallon.
Seven,
So
geez, it's 5 here.
yeah,
It's a
so
well, that's still ridiculously high, but yeah,
but hey, that's better than over here right
yeah,
now. So
yeah.
talk to us how you did it. How did you mentally, physically get through all that 5 days, I believe you said.
Specifically for the drive, it was something that I had wanted to do for like years, like almost like I was in California wrestling for about 8 years before I left to go to PA. And I was introduced very early in my wrestling career to a promotion out here that somebody said would fit my vibe, and because I'm more of a comedy kind of dude. I love entertaining, and I had friends at training who would call me like Peter Parker or whatever because I would like talk trash while I'm wrestling or like say something funny and stupid while I'm supposed to be fighting somebody. And like I love Spider-Man, like that's my Carnage hat. I have a Spider-Man tattoo on my
Oh wow.
wrist. Where is it? There it is. So like that meant a lot that they did that. But they've introduced me to Chikara, which runs out of Philly. And I was like, oh my God, these guys are doing really great wrestling and being really funny. Like that's my goal. That's what I want. So from a very early wrestling age, I had wanted to go to Chikara badly. And it just took a lot of time and money to eventually get the nerve to pack up my entire life into a Honda Accord and drive it across the country for 4 days to get here. But yeah, that was the initial, that was the impetus. The starting part was I was introduced to Chikara, and once I was told where Chikara was, I was like, all right, I just gotta eventually get my way over there.
Yeah, I mean, no, especially Chikara is a huge independent wrestling promotion. For those who don't know, has produced like a lot of names. I think from I'm sorry if I don't get this correct, so please don't hate me. Like I think if I remember correctly, Drew Gulak is a name.
Yes.
Tracy Williams, I believe, is a name. Orange Cassidy, I believe, is a huge name that came from
Yes.
Chikara. So Wheeler
You
Yuta.
got
I mean, I love Yuta. So
you got Orange Cassidy, Chuck Taylor, Bryce Remsburg, the referee at
yep.
AEW. He came out of Chikara. Eddie Kingston was a huge part of Chikara for a very long time. A lot of the names that people know now, even like to get to WWE, you got Cesaro was in Chikara for an incredibly long time. Brody Lee, what was it? Luke Harper, that was his WWE name. These guys made their foothold in wrestling in Chikara, and it just held such an important place in my mind, and I was fortunate enough to get to be there for a too brief of a time, but I was happy with the people I had met there, the friends I had made there. I still see them every so often out here at wrestling shows or at training now at another school. But yeah, it was just so like once I realized that I could be funny and wrestle, that's when I was like, I think this is what I'm going to stick with for a while is wrestling.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's really awesome when you have a gift to entertain the crowd and really be a good wrestler as well on the side, or not on the side, but more like kind of a mixture of both. It's really cool because, like we had mentioned before, of like Orange Cassidy that could do that. Even I don't like to give him credit, but MJF does a great job
Oh
at
my
doing
God,
kind of the
absolutely.
same thing.
Absolutely. I think on a personal note, I think MJF is somebody who understands wrestling very amazingly well. He understands who he is perceived as and just takes that ball and runs with it like crazy.
Oh yeah, I mean trust me, I was in the building in AEW in Los Angeles and hearing that pipe bomb that he had.
Yeah.
Whew, that stuff was
I watched that
uncensored.
recently. I watched that recently with my girlfriend, and she asked me, like, was he supposed to do all of that? And I'm like, I think, I don't know. That's
It's
how
kind of
good
one.
it was.
It's kind of one of those things in wrestling where it's like, is it?
Yeah, yeah. It gets to a certain point, and you're like, uh-oh, somebody's
Yeah.
fired. Somebody's in trouble.
And speaking about wrestling, I mean, shout out to the Wrestling Classic, by the way, on Instagram, because he's been a producer of the podcast and a very good friend of mine for this question. What is your earliest memories of wrestling?
I remember when I was like 5 or 6, like very young. I grew up in a household with my dad and my 2 oldest brothers, my older brothers, and they were both 10 and 8 years older than me. And I remember they would just, I mean, throw me like a rag doll in our we had this huge bed, and they would like at the time I didn't know it, but they would like suplex me or they would choke slam me or they would like body slam me. And I remember just asking them one time, like, what is this? Like, what are you guys doing? Where's this coming from? And at the time they had told me that I was like, you're too young to really get into it now. When you're older, you can find out, either through us or on your own, but we don't want to teach you right now because it's kind of violent. And then they would just begin to pick me up again and throw me again. So that was like I kind of was introduced to it at that point. And then I remember the first match I ever saw on my own. It was a SmackDown. I had to be maybe like 11. And it was an episode of SmackDown where it was the TLC 4-way. It was the Hardys, the Dudleys, Edge and Christian, and Benoit and Jericho in a 4-way TLC match. And I remember watching the match and seeing these big dudes like the Dudleys just throwing people like crazy. And I was like, there's no way I could do that. Like that doesn't connect with me at all. But the one thing that I saw that I connected with was Jeff Hardy had 2 ladders set up on the outside, and he like leapfrogged over one ladder and did a leg drop through the announce table. And I was like, oh, I can throw my body. Like I may not be able to lift anybody, but I can throw myself at people. So like from then I latched onto it. And then I found out I had friends who liked wrestling. And so they kind of kept my interest going all the way up until now.
Oh yeah, I mean that's a cool beginning. Are you kidding me? A fatal four-way TLC match, especially
Yeah,
during that time.
on free TV, giving away for
Yeah, I
free on
mean that.
TV.
I think we were like really should value sometimes that some of these matches that air on television because like these matches are like pay-per-view $60 or if you don't
I
have the
know.
network or Peacock nowadays,
Yeah.
really value stuff like that.
Yeah, it's probably actually right now, like I hear it a lot. It's probably like the best time to be a wrestling fan
Mm,
because YouTube's available. I mean, you can
mm,
literally almost anything. You can just be like, "Hey, have you heard of this wrestler?" "Oh, no, I haven't." And you just type their name into YouTube and like a million different top 10 moves and like the best matches come
mm,
up and you can just show somebody's like entire library and be
mm.
like, "Study this," you know? So it's great to grow up with that available because I can't even imagine being in like the 80s and trying to find footage of like a Japanese wrestler that I'm really into and having to like black market trade videotapes with people. Like that sounds insane.
I mean, it does, but I mean, going back to your point of, really this is the best time to be a wrestling fan. Like, especially with someone like myself who is barely, okay, when I say barely, 2018. So sorry, fans. 2018. Really, really embracing the independent scene. And especially with
Mhm.
COVID, what had happened with the pandemic and everything had shut down. It really gave me the opportunity to look at these independent wrestling companies that I didn't know was either near me or that was an hour from me or even in California, even in back when like I think it was like July, I want to say of 2020 they were having like these independent wrestling shows in the East Coast because of course California we had to wait a whole year
Yeah,
to have them. So
yeah.
like seeing people like Blake Christian, Lee Moriarty, and people like that, and seeing them kill it in the indies still and big companies is crazy.
It's um it's really fun to like compare the two areas of wrestling because like when I was back home and I would watch East Coast wrestling, I would hear guys that I trained with or guys that I worked shows with be like, "Oh, did you see like Hollow Wicked out of Chikara? He did this cool thing and like that." But then now I'm out here
Mm,
seeing these guys watch West Coast wrestling and they're talking about like the Divine Brothers at like MPW and stuff like that, or like Santino Brothers. A lot of Eli Everfly, a lot of
mhm,
talk of guys from Santino's and stuff, and it's like, man, it's you guys really. It's weird to see because the West Coast kids hold other kids in higher regard. You know, you
mm.
could talk to somebody in SoCal and they might be the most like, oh, I might be okay or I might be good, but you should see like Leo Rush on the East Coast. He's amazing. And then the same thing happens on the East Coast. Somebody on the East Coast, like Willow Nightingale, should be like, oh, I'm decent, but like Delilah Doom out of the West Coast, she's amazing. It's a mutual respect that I don't think they realize that they have.
It's funny that you mentioned that. Shout out to Prestige Wrestling, by the way. I had watched their show last night with like Mia Yim was on the card. The main event was Lee Moriarty versus uh Takeshita. There we go. I said
Yeah.
it right. I keep calling him something else, but anyway, but no, and seeing that card and seeing that show of a mixture of East Coast talent, West Coast talent, because that promotion's based on West Coast, but more so Washington.
Hmm.
But seeing Willow Nightingale was probably the biggest treat
Yeah.
ever because she is so good, she is so humble, she is so, like I honestly think that she's one of the best women's wrestlers that's not signed to to a company right now. Because like she had faced off against Mia Yim. This was Mia Yim's homecoming. Because for those who don't know,
Fontana.
Pomona
Yeah.
and Fontana is kind of like 30 minutes away from each other. But we're gonna call it LA for now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
um,
that's how I explain to people out here where I'm from. They're like, "Oh, where do you come from?" I'm like, an hour east of LA. Just call it LA."
Yeah, and like seeing someone like a Willow Nightingale, who I've seen in GCW and all that in the East Coast, and seeing them here in the West Coast is truly a treat. So I get what you're saying when seeing those talent and really like from a West Coast perspective and an East Coast perspective.
I first saw Willow in New York like 20, maybe 18, maybe 17
Mhm.
or 18 when I first got out here. And She was wrestling for a company, I think it was NYWC, New York Wrestling Connection, and hands down, easily best match of the night. She had the single best match on the whole card that night. And she just happened to be good friends with my friend out here who moved from the West Coast. And so I saw them talking after the show, and I walked up to her and I said, "Hey, I don't want to interrupt. I just want to let you know you did so incredible tonight. You had easily the best match on the card." And she was so just smiley and like almost like brought to tears that somebody said that, but she was like, "Oh my God, thank you so." And this was before she got really like popular like she did now. Like even 5 years ago, probably even before I ever met her, she had been having these banger matches, great matches. And I don't know, like pro wrestling is such a weird thing because these people could be having these matches for like 8 years and no one would know it. But then one match somewhere in front of the right audience with the right person, and boom, superstardom all across the country.
Right. Yeah, it's really weird how like wrestling works because like as you said, it depends on where it is, who's around you, and like how social media perceives it. You know what I mean? It's like it's very much a kind of a picking a needle out of a haystack kind of situation where it's like a Jacob Tarasso match versus Nick Wayne is not getting as much love as Starboy Charlie versus I'm gonna shout out to JCW by the way, Cole Radrick, someone of that sort. So
It's just such a like a weird crapshoot, like I don't know, because to me when I start to kind of talk about that stuff, I feel like I sound bitter because I've been wrestling for 11 years. I started training in 2009, but I had my first match in 2011. And like it's been 11 years and I haven't had a tryout. I haven't had like the moment yet, you know what I mean, where everybody just like recognizes, oh, this dude can wrestle or whatever. But I think it's the drive for that moment that still keeps me saying like, well, all right, one more year, one more year of this, and then we'll see if it happens. And then that year ends and I'm like, all right, maybe one more year, like it kind of keeps me going because I want to prove that I can do it.
Oh yeah. I think one of the main inspirations that I think a lot of people get at, not just myself, or myself included, but like I think a lot of good inspiration is that like seeing other people go on to bigger and better things. That's what kind of inspires. And for me at least, I don't know if you agree with it, but like seeing people like a great example. I will keep saying this example, but Vinny Wasco. I don't know if you're familiar with
I
Vinny
don't think
Wasco.
I've met Vinny, but I've seen his name around.
Yeah, so Vinny Wasco came from Wasco, California, which I think is about it's kind of like Central California, I want to say.
Okay.
And so I knew him when he was doing vlogs for WrestleMania back in 2016. And then he became, training for a wrestler at Satino Brothers. And then now he signed to NXT as a referee known as Joey Gonzalez. So like seeing people like that succeed and so much more and having these conversations really, inspire me to say, it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I had a similar thing, not as like, not exact, but similar with Tyler Rust, because I started training right around the time he started to get bigger and more noticed and do more things, right? So he was kind of already on the way out of like local guy status when I started. And so when he would come to the school or when we would see him and stuff, I'd be like, oh my God, that's Rust, or but then when I got to hang out with him more and meet him more, I'm like, oh, he's cool. He's a cool dude. And then to see him go to NXT, I was like, finally, like
right.
He's been grinding hard for so long. He did so many different things, took himself out to Japan, got incredibly shredded, it did all these things for this sport. And then to see him go to NXT, I was like, there you go, dude. You did literally everything everybody tells you you're supposed to do and wishes they could do.
Right. I think what it is too is that we're in the shift of the times. I think that like if you had asked like people in the 90s and early 2000s of like, oh well, how do you go over here? Well, you had to know this person, you had to do that, you had to go through this. And it was a lot more not secretive, but more like kind of you had to know people. Like you had to be on the know. Where compared to now, it's very much open. It's very much, people are connecting with each other. Their social media is a huge thing. And it's very, I feel like now, I mean, people will disagree with me, but I feel like now it's more of a positive thing that like people are getting out there and putting themselves out to all these other companies that I've seen. I think we mentioned it before, EWF,
Mhm.
MPW, Millennium Pro Wrestling, oh my God, new ones like Pandemonium Pro Wrestling have been doing great things. Like just kind of seeing these people, grow, I think, and witnessing them really kill it at their game. Like I'll say this proudly too. Brandon Gatson is one of the greatest people I've ever seen.
I love Brandon. I've only ever wrestled Brandon twice, but
Mm,
very, very like one of the most down to earth people I think you could find
oh yeah.
is Brandon. He's very understanding. He's very humble. He's very nice. He's got a great kid. He's got pretty much the whole package of what a person like could be.
Yeah, because I see him killing it now with GCW. I mean, he
Mhm.
had his debut last year, and then now with LA Fights. So like, he deserves it, man. I mean, I've shared locker rooms with him, and I've seen the way that he truly is a star, and then people don't notice that because it's on these small venues. But then now they're finally figuring out, hey, Brandon Gatson, main event quality, back when that was his nickname.
Can I share a story of my match with Brandon? Because
Sure.
so the first time I ever wrestled Brandon, a few things went wrong, and I'm going to
Mhm.
fully admit fault.
Mhm.
First thing was, so I had been told I was wrestling Brandon maybe like a month or two in advance. And other guys I don't remember who, but other guys in the locker room started coming up to me like, "Oh, you're wrestling Brandon, huh? Be careful. He's a little stiff. He might hit you. He's gonna hit you." So I hadn't really trained with Brandon at that point or like seen Brandon that often, so I wasn't super familiar with him. So at the time, I just kind of bought into it. I was like, "Oh my God, he's gonna beat the hell out of me. Like
Mhm.
this is gonna be hard." And so we go into the match, we talk it out or whatever. We get in there, and I was so worried about him stiffing me that I would take a little half step back whenever he swung at me
Mhm.
to, guard myself as much as I could from the hit, which only made him madder. So that obviously wasn't a smart move on my end.
Right.
We go through the match and I give him a DDT through the ropes, right?
Mhm.
As I give him the DDT, my fists like this, they just so happen to be right in his Adam's apple, right?
Mhm.
He lands on his face, and his Adam's apple hits my throat or hits my fist, and it shuts his windpipe. He's out. He's instantly knocked out.
Oh
And
wow.
so I'm in the ring, and I'm stomping on Brandon. He wakes up eventually and moves over to a corner. I start stomping on his leg. Nothing. He's not moving. No reaction. So I'm like, uh-oh. And I get close to him. I'm like, I put my foot on his chest to like look like I'm choking him. And I step real close. I go, "Hey, Brandon, are you okay? Like, what's going on?" He throws up this clear
Oh wow.
goo onto himself, full of noodles. There was ramen noodles in clear just on his chest. And I immediately like, "Oh no." So the referee grabs me, takes me away from me. And then I go, "Did you see that?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm going to go check on him." I was like, "Please make sure he's okay."
Right.
So I'm in the opposite corner. I'm a heel at the time. So I'm in the opposite corner and I get on the middle rope and I throw my hands up. I'm like, "Yeah, I beat Brandon Gatson." But in my head, I'm like, "No, I just murdered Brandon. Oh no." So like we go through the rest of the match. He ends up being fine. We get to the locker room and he tells me like, he tells me what happened, that I knocked him out by accident. And he's like, in that moment, I thought to myself, should I give him a receipt? Like, should I really just beat this kid up for doing all of this? And then he's like, no, you know what? He's young. He didn't do it on purpose. It was a mistake. It was a fluke. So I cooled myself down and I didn't stiff you. And I appreciated that greatly because I was terrified.
Right,
I
right, right,
was like, either I killed Brandon or Brandon is going to kill me.
right.
So, but that just goes back to show you how much of a good person Brandon is, because in the heat of the moment of being knocked unconscious and throwing up ramen noodles, he thought to himself, it was an accident. Just let it go and move on.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a scary moment.
Yeah,
I could
yeah, I was
definitely,
terrified.
but no, as you said, it goes back to how much of a great person that he is. I mean, there's plenty of times where, I got to, speak for him for a little bit, and he's just so just he's cool. That's all I could say. Like he's cool.
Yeah.
He's laid back, and it's cool to see him doing big stuff over there. So let's talk about a little bit, because probably people that are listening or watching, I appreciate if you're doing both, but want to know more about Jacob Tarasso. What is Jacob Tarasso's story? One of the things I do want to start out with is the phenomenal nickname that you have. I'm probably gonna mess it up because my Spanish is not the greatest. I am so sorry in general.
Mine neither, dude.
So it's mala suerte encarnada.
Yes. Bad luck
No.
incarnate. Yeah, you got it.
So-
I've had people say enchilada, and I'm like, you're not far off. That's not bad. It's not right, but
Mhm.
I don't know. I was just kind of like, I've gone through a few different like monikers. Probably my favorite is Sugar City Urchin. I'm a big Green Day fan. I got all of this tattoos all on my arm are all different Green Day references. If you ask Mike Contreras who my favorite band is, he's gonna say Green Day, because when I was in high school, I learned every single Green Day song on the bass. I still know like 90% of them on bass guitar. But so Sugar City Urchin is a line from a song called Tightwad Hill. And it just says Sugar City Urchin wasting time up on Tightwad Hill. And I was like, oh, that's a cool like phrase to call somebody. I don't know what it means. I just thought it sounded neat. So that I called myself Sugar City Urchin for a while. A previous gimmick that I'm trying to not do anymore, just for my personal health, is I used to have an energy drink gimmick. There's a lot of pictures out there with me going to the ring with energy drinks and drinking them in the ring. And I had a couple matches where the energy drink was like my spinach for Popeye, where I would drink the energy drink and I would just hold up out of nowhere and start body slamming people. So I called myself the energy drink fiend that bleeds caffeine. But that was like really long. That was a long thing for people to say. So I was like, maybe I'll not do that as often. And then Mala Suerte Encarnada, I just thought it sounded cool. I was like, that sounds neat. Like, and then I started thinking about it, and I feel like I'm a heel. Like the majority of my career, I've been a heel. And I started to think about the Mala Suerte thing as like, why would I want to be bad luck? Like, why would somebody want to do that? And so I started to think of it in a way as a lot of my wrestling career and some of my personal life, I think people can relate to that, can be summed up as bad luck. There are opportunities that come up that for whatever reason I can't take. And that's bad luck, you know? And so as a character, I started to think, well, maybe I start getting tired of receiving the bad luck. I am going to start causing people bad luck. So like, you come into the ring with me and you have an opportunity ahead of you. If I hurt you in this match, well, that's just some bad luck. It just happens, right? Accidents happen. So that opportunity gets taken away from you, just like it did from me. So like that's kind of how I started to think about it, which is where I came up with the incarnate part of bad luck. Now I am the bad luck going on to other people.
Okay. So, in a sense, it's like you team with me. It's not gonna it's not gonna work out.
It's pretty much how I see it, as because like I'm a huge comic book nerd, and like all this Marvel stuff that's been coming out has just been like fodder for my brain. It's kind of like a villain who is so sick of things happening to them that they decide to cause the things instead of just constantly letting the thing happen to you. No, you know what? I'm going to stand up against it. I'm actually going to cause the problem now instead of just taking problems.
Yeah, I mean, that's I mean, definitely giving bad luck is
Yes.
something to really go about, especially in the wrestling world.
Now I have a match coming up on the 25th where I'm a face. So now I'm like, I don't think I can do that. I don't think I can do that. I think I got to change my name again.
So I'm very curious. Like, do you prefer being the face or do you prefer the heel?
I think it's kind of like a case by case basis, because like obviously, so when I started wrestling, I wasn't a heel. I was a baby face for like 2 years ish. And then I turned heel, and almost from like 2015 till like now, I have just been a heel almost everywhere I go.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much if I leave the area, like if I leave when I would leave SoCal or when I would leave out here in PA, then I would be a face for like 1 or 2 matches. But a vast majority of my career has been a heel, and I think I do find being a heel easier because I also took psychology at Valley College, and my understanding of people is it is so much easier for you to see a person you are unfamiliar with and not like them, right? You're a lot more, it's not good, but most people are more likely to see a complete stranger and think something bad about them than good. So it's so much easier for me to think I could just look at somebody the wrong way. I don't have to say a word. I don't have to do anything. I could just give somebody a weird look and they're like, oh, I don't like that guy. Already booing me, right? So I understand being a heel, I think, in wrestling better than I do a face, because as a face, there's so much effort. I gotta high five these people. I gotta get them up. I gotta get them doing the clap. Like there's almost no effort in being a heel. You just look at somebody the wrong way, and you're already a heel in their mind.
Yep. I mean, I think the beauty of being a heel is that you get to have a lot of fun with it. I mean, of course, you can have fun with being a babyface as well,
Right.
but like, it's the I think it's the fun of getting the crowd that not on your back, or to just really have the either like real good heat, or it's just like just it's heat, but it's there.
Yeah. There are moments too where like I've had to be a face, and when I can get the crowd behind me as a face, I feel like I've accomplished so much more than if I'm a heel, because like if I can get the crowd to do the clap without me having to do it for them, if they just
Right.
not generically, if they just genuinely
Mhm.
start clapping on their own, I'm like, oh my god, I did it. They're doing it without my help. Like
Right.
like that feels like such a bigger relief than the whole audience booing me, because like I can do that anywhere. I can't get people to like me everywhere.
Right.
I can
Right.
get people
Right.
to hate me anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly. I think it's truly a gift when a wrestler could be both, like you had mentioned before, a heel but a babyface in some occasions. Like there's some, but sometimes I also feel like as a fan coming into the outer perspective too, is that if you know that that person is a heel and you've embraced it, they're a great heel. But then when they go as a babyface in a company that you're like, oh well, yesterday he was a heel, it's kind of hard that you're just like.
If so, my last few matches in California, I think my last 2 matches for California in for EWF, I turned face,
Mhm.
and I had been a heel. That was like my home company. I graduated from Jesse School. I went straight to EWF, and like that was my home for like 8 years, right? And for about 6 of those years, I had been a heel. So I had
Mm.
gone from a long 6-year streak of them hating me to one Facebook post that I had posted about turning face. And then I showed up at Covina and I was face, and everybody was instantly behind me. Everybody really took to me being a face. And I was like, oh, I could have done this years ago. Like I could have really done this whenever I wanted and started selling merch.
Yeah, I mean, one face turn and then, or I'm sorry, one Facebook post and then
Yeah.
boom.
Yeah. That's all it took.
Oh my gosh. I mean, see the power of social media, man.
It's a dangerous thing sometimes.
I think it's more. It's very much a teeter totter. It's like sometimes it'll be good and sometimes it'll be bad. But at the end of the day, as long as you enjoy it and do make the best that you can with it, I think it works out perfectly.
Yeah, I think it definitely takes practice, I would say.
Mm,
And not like posting every single day practice. I mean practice in like it takes a certain level of knowledge and understanding, and obviously algorithms are insane to understand. So there's all kinds of different aspects that go into a successful social media presence that are just like almost completely foreign to me. And it's almost become a necessity to have social media down to a science to become a big star.
oh yeah, I mean, will it ever make sense to me about the algorithms and sometimes the cheers and the boos? No. but it's something fun to try
Yeah.
out. I mean, if you have a dream, I mean, go pursue it. You know what I mean? Don't like say, oh, well, I'm gonna do it later. Like, do it now, man. Especially now's the time to do it.
Yeah. Like I said about me personally moving, man, I wish I had done it so much sooner, because there are
Mm,
so many other opportunities. Who knows what I could have had out here that I missed out on because I stayed home being scared of, like, oh, well, I'm going to be alone out there. Or, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing out there yet. If I had just like bit the bullet, there are so many guys who just bite the bullet and are
mhm,
like, I'm going to go to Japan for 3 months and
right.
train. And then they come back and they're like crazy famous because they went to Japan. If I had done that for myself to move to Philly for, let's say, 6 years instead of 8 years, right? Who knows what could happen? There's so many what ifs.
Right. I mean, but as my family would always say, everything happens for a reason. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So like, you're killing it now, doing everything in PA and in the East Coast. And I mean, hey, we don't know, but maybe people will go back to this interview and say, hey, do you know that Jacob Tarasso? Like that guy, like that guy's an Impact now, or
Yeah.
WWE or AEW,
Yeah. It'd be crazy. There's so many, there's so many people I know now personally that are at these places where I'm like, man,
Hmm.
that's, if they can do it. It's not one of those things where it's like, oh, if they can do it, I can do it. It's one of those things of like, oh man, if they could do it, I know their drive and I know their steps and I know their thought processes. So if I apply that to myself, it makes it much more understandable to get to that level.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was funny that you mentioned that because I'm going to go back to the show again that we had talked about earlier, and that is the AEW Dynamite, first ever in California over at the Forum. Which again, guys, it's not Los Angeles, it's Inglewood. Let's get that straight.
Yeah.
Um, and it was cool because I got to see a lot of people that again I had watched in the Indies and have seen them grow. Like shout out to Johnny Robbie, who a huge person in MPW right now. Oh my gosh, who did I see in the crowd? Zeta, no, she competed. No, Viva Van is another one. There's like all these other different professional wrestlers that I saw that I'm like, oh shoot, like I just saw them recently.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really cool too. And like, I don't know how I feel about it, but it's so cool, at least personally for me, when I see somebody I know who works like a dark match, like an AEW
Mhm.
dark or something like that. And I'm like, dude, I know you have tried so hard just to get this opportunity that you have. And like, just, there's a wrestler I know I train with now out here. His name is Ryan Mooney.
Mm,
And he did a dark match, like a 6-man tag dark match. And like, I was so happy for him because I know Ryan works his ass off
right,
at
right, right.
everything he does, at his real life, in wrestling, everything he does. He tries his so hard. And to see him get that opportunity to be there, I knew it meant the world to him. And I was like, good for you, dude. Like, I'm genuinely happy that he got that.
That's the same way how I feel with all these other wrestlers that go on to AEW Dark. That's why, guys, don't sleep on Dark. That it's a good show.
Yeah.
I mean, like some people got signed because of AEW Dark. A huge example, Powerhouse Hobbs. He was a guy
Yeah.
from NorCal, and now
Yeah. He made
he's a
it
part of
through.
Team
He made it
Taz.
through the system.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome to see these people, do like succeed as I mentioned before.
It's probably like the most, I don't want to say inspiring, but like it definitely gives you a sense of good for them. Like there's a
Mm,
feeling there that you feel for the person that you're like, man, I've watched this dude like start in the dojo and start in the school, and now he's doing this, and it's really, really neat to see them go that far.
right. This is kind of an off-topic question, but we had mentioned it kind of earlier. I don't know if it's the same case over in PA, but I know in California there's a lot of cities that are misconcepted as LA, like just simply LA. Like we had talked about Pomona,
Hmm.
Inglewood. I mean, it's in LA County, but it's not
LA,
LA.
right?
Do you have like how do you feel about like kind of people misconcepting cities? And maybe as a follow-up, is that the same case over there in PA?
So I've kind of experienced two different areas of that because, like I said earlier, when I tell people I'm from Colton, they're like, "What is that?" So I'm like, it's part of San Bernardino," and then they're like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "It's LA. It's pretty much LA." It's the same thing out here because if I tell you that I live in Ivyland, right, or
Mhm.
wherever, you're like, "What's that?" Oh, it's near Philly. you know? So like, especially out here, the cities and the towns work a lot differently than they do in California. So we have like townships out here, which are like tiny bite-sized cities inside like a major city. So like there's, like I said, Ivyland, there's Hatboro, there's Willow Grove, there's King of Prussia and all of that, right? And they're all within like a 20-minute drive of each other. So there's it really confused me for a very long time. I had lived by myself in Roslyn, PA, right? I think I was by myself. I might have been with my girlfriend. I don't remember. But we lived in Roslyn. That is technically Abington. So my mail would say Abington, but my driver's license would say Roslyn. It's the same area, city technically, but they go by two different names. It's same zip code and everything. And I was like, how do I know where I live? Like it was so confusing to me, especially when I had to communicate to my grandparents, hey, send me mail at this address. And they're like, are you sure? Because it says this address. I'm like, yes, I promise you, they're the same place. Just trust me.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. I mean, I think over here in California, that's I'm trying to think of a city, especially within kind of our area.
The equivalent I can think of is Grand Terrace. Like Grand Terrace is kind of like inside of Colton, but yet it's like its own city. So like that's kind of the closest thing I could think of.
I remember when I went to Terrace Hills Middle School, by the way, I went to over there. I just remember going up that mountain, going up that hill. And then I was like, this is its own separate city? Like
Yeah, it's weird. It's really weird because there's really not even any signage. Like all of a sudden it just turns from Colton to Grand Terrace. And in some parts you can tell like, oh, this is Grand Terrace because there's like a different vibe almost the second you cross city border, you know?
Well, yeah, but the same thing goes with, we had mentioned before about San Bernardino Valley College. Technically, it is not San Bernardino. It's Colton,
I
because
didn't know that. I thought it was San Bernardino.
It is okay. So it's San Bernardino, like where Baker's is, right across the street from Valley College.
Yeah.
From Baker's to where the swap meet is, over that way is San Bernardino. From the 99-cent store on the other side of campus, that way is Colton. So like,
I never knew that. That's funny.
It's kind of in the middle.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's weird. It's like it just half and half. But no, yeah, that's crazy how like the East Coast has way different vibes than over here.
The biggest difference I noticed right away is the roads. The roads are, I used to joke with my bosses out here at different jobs. I would be like, it feels like the settlers landed on the East Coast and then just put streets everywhere. Like they threw spaghetti at a piece of paper and was like, okay, those are the streets. And then as they got farther west, they started to grid things out into squares. So by the time you got to the West Coast, everything was pretty much a square instead of this weird spaghetti monster on a map. Like it's so weird out here, the streets.
Yeah, hopefully if I ever make it there, it's gonna be a challenge. But Jacob, I do want to say thank you so much for taking the time. I know we had rescheduled a bunch of times, which I do apologize. But before we go though, I guess my final question is something that I always ask my guests, and it's the name of the podcast, Your Story. Is Jacob Tarasso, after all this time in the Indies and making that transition from the West Coast to East Coast and getting to train under Jesse Hernandez, getting to do all these different types of wrestling promotions in Cali and also over there in PA in the West Coast, East Coast. Are you proud of your story? Like, has everything you've done thus far something that you could say that looking back now that you're proud of, or do you feel like there's still more?
I definitely do feel like there's more going on. I feel like at least once a year, if not more, I go through this debate of like, man, am I going to keep doing this? Or like, is this the last year? Is next year the last year? And I share a feeling with Chuck Taylor. Chuck Taylor's a huge influence on my in-ring and my mental, like how I view wrestling and stuff. Same thing with Chris Hero. Love Chris Hero. But his mentality is, as long as it's fun, I'm going to keep doing it. Once it stops being fun, that's when I think it's time for me to take a step back and look at if I should continue. And like I said, I started in 2011. There have definitely been moments that were not fun, hurting my knee, losing losing connections with a bunch of people, like friends outside of wrestling and stuff like that. Those are not fun, but the overall arc of my wrestling has been so enjoyable, a lot of fun, and I'm still having fun. I still love going to training. I've been training like 13 years at this point, and still I absolutely love getting in there with somebody who's brand new and being able to guide them and teach them, or getting in there with somebody who's like a couple of years ahead of me and learning things from them and stuff like that. Like, that still all brings me happiness and joy. It's still fun to do. So I definitely have some moments in my wrestling where I wish things had gone differently, or I wish there were so many opportunities I just talked myself out of, that I wish I would have taken. But at the same time, there are so many more things that I'm incredibly happy with. I'm super proud of. I still have matches on my YouTube from like 12-ish years ago that I'm like, oh, look at this cool thing I did, or like, oh, look at the thought that I put into this, like I'm still proud of those aspects. So I don't think I'm done for the foreseeable future. I still find joy in doing this. So until that joy runs out, I'm stuck in wrestling.
Well, Jacob, thank you so much for being a part of your story, the return episode after some things didn't work out, but I do appreciate it. Where can the people find you if they want to follow your journey?
So I have on Twitter, I am at Tarasso_tweets. That's my name on the screen there. You need to know how to spell it. For some reason, some people have a really hard time spelling my name. So there it is. On Facebook, I am Jacob Tarasso. You can just search my name, or my at page is literally I am Jacob Tarasso. And on Instagram, I am J_Tarasso.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jacob. This was such a great conversation that we had, and it was awesome to get that conversation with you. As an IE boy himself, it's awesome to finally get that conversation together. But make sure you guys go follow Jacob. I think I'm putting it this way, right? Okay. So, just make sure you guys go follow him, and I don't know, maybe just subscribe to the podcast at Your Story on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you can find your podcast, or on YouTube if you're actually watching this. Maybe subscribe to me. I'm
on YouTube too. I might take a couple subscribers if I could as well.
Hey, yeah, definitely go subscribe to him. Link will be down in the description below. And I will see you guys in the next episode of Your Story Season 3.